I manage a small family-owned restaurant in a modest town. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps me fulfilled. For over a year, I was in a relationship with someone who, at first, seemed to share my values. She had a penchant for luxury, but I dismissed it as a harmless preference for the finer things in life. Over time, however, her tastes grew into incessant demands I couldn't afford to meet. It began subtly, small hints about designer clothes or dreamy vacations. I didn't think much of it, chalking it up to daydreaming. But her aspirations became grander with each passing day. She spoke of moving into a swanky condo, jetting off on expensive trips, and living a lifestyle far beyond my means. I tried meeting her halfway, but no matter how much effort I put in, it was never enough. The turning point came after we had dinner with my parents one evening. She casually mentioned wanting a bright yellow Lamborghini she'd spotted online. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. She wasn't laughing. She insisted I take out a loan to buy it, claiming my steady job made me a good candidate to cover the payments. The idea was absurd, completely beyond my budget. When I refused, she accused me of lacking ambition and not caring about her dreams. "If you won't invest in my happiness, maybe someone else will," she snapped before storming out of my apartment. The following weeks were a series of arguments and tension. She bombarded me with links to expensive cars, pressured me to work multiple jobs, and insisted we deserved the best. My mother pulled me aside, warning me these were red flags, but I still cared for her and hoped she would see reason. Things came to a head one afternoon in a coffee shop. She informed me she'd been seeing someone else, a wealthy man from a prominent family who was willing to buy her the Lamborghini. "He believes in me more than you do," she said with a cold finality before walking out. I was left reeling, a mix of betrayal and, oddly, relief. Her materialistic demands had weighed heavily on me, and now it was over. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, spending time with family and finding solace in my routine. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned she was now riding around town in fancy cars, flaunting her new life. It hurt, but I knew I couldn't compete with someone willing to bankroll her extravagant desires. Months passed, and I began to regain a sense of normalcy. Then one afternoon, as I was locking up the restaurant, I saw her at the entrance. She looked anxious and worn down, a stark contrast to her previously confident demeanor. She explained her relationship with the wealthy man had fallen apart. He had become controlling, cutting off her finances and leaving her stranded. She fled with nothing but a few suitcases. Now, she stood before me, claiming she realized I was the only person who had ever truly cared for her. I was torn. Her audacity left me speechless. After all the pain she caused, why return to me? But I could see genuine distress in her eyes. Against my better judgment, I decided to hear her out. She pleaded for a chance to explain, and though I remained skeptical, I agreed to let her stay on my couch for a few days, strictly as a short-term arrangement. At first, she seemed humbled. She reminisced about our good times and claimed she had learned money wasn't everything. I wanted to believe her, but it wasn't long before old habits resurfaced. She complained about the modest retail job I had helped her find, calling it demeaning. She criticized my small apartment and showed frustration over the absence of the luxuries she once enjoyed. One afternoon, I caught her rifling through my desk drawer, where I keep important documents, bank statements, lease agreements, and the like. When I confronted her, she claimed she was looking for a pen. Her behavior unsettled me, and I began locking my files. She was offended, accusing me of not trusting her. Trust isn't automatic, I reminded her, especially given our history. She glared at me but dropped the subject. Her entitlement only grew. She spent her paychecks as quickly as she earned them and expected me to shoulder most of the living expenses. When I confronted her, she casually remarked, "You have a stable income, so why can't you cover it?" It was the same sense of entitlement that had once fueled her demand for a Lamborghini. That was the breaking point. I gave her 2 weeks to find a new place. She accused me of abandoning her in her time of need, but I reminded her she had abandoned me first for a lavish fantasy. She stormed out, muttering that I would regret my decision. Sure enough, the drama didn't end there. Within days, she bombarded me with texts, demanding we meet to discuss our future. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet her at a diner. She claimed her wealthy ex was threatening to sue her over stolen gifts or some private agreement. She demanded money from me to hire a lawyer, insisting I was partly responsible for her situation because I hadn't agreed to buy the Lamborghini. I was done. Her logic was absurd, and I told her so. Furious, she warned me, "You'll regret this," before storming out. Her words left me uneasy, but I refused to let her manipulate me again. I told my parents about her threats, and my father advised me to document everything, every text, every conversation, just in case. I followed his advice, saving messages and confiding in close friends about the situation. A week later, she appeared at my restaurant during the busy lunch rush, demanding to speak with me privately. My gut told me this was far from over. It was an ordinary day at the restaurant when she stormed in, demanding to speak with me. I refused, pointing out that I was in the middle of work, but she raised her voice, creating a scene that left diners uncomfortable and my staff uneasy. My boss, visibly annoyed by the disruption, intervened and asked us to step outside. Reluctantly, I followed her, hoping to defuse the situation. Outside, she thrust a piece of paper at me, claiming it was a legal notice accusing me of causing her emotional harm and breaking promises of financial support. She demanded that I sign an agreement to cover her legal fees or face serious consequences. One glance at the document made it clear it was amateurish and blatantly fake. I refused, telling her there was no way I would sign such nonsense. That's when her threats turned darker. She warned me she would smear my name on social media and accuse me of heinous acts if I didn't comply. I was furious. This had gone beyond manipulation. It was outright harassment. I told her firmly that if she didn't stop, I would contact the police. Her face contorted with anger as she stormed off, muttering that I'd regret my decision. My boss, who had witnessed part of the ordeal, urged me to take her threats seriously and file a police report to protect myself. I could see the concern in his eyes, and I realized I couldn't let this continue. That evening, I drove to my parents' house and laid everything out for them. My father was adamant. I needed to consult an attorney to confirm she had no legal grounds for her absurd claims. The next morning, I met with a local lawyer who specialized in civil disputes. After hearing my story, she didn't mince words. "She has no case," she assured me, "but keep documenting everything. If she escalates, contact the police immediately, and don't engage with her more than necessary." Following my lawyer's advice, I became more vigilant. Meanwhile, I discovered she had been messaging mutual friends, spinning elaborate lies about how I had trapped her in debt, led her on, and abandoned her in a time of need. Thankfully, most people saw through her fabrications. A close friend even forwarded me screenshots of her messages, which I saved as further evidence. The situation came to a boiling point one night when she showed up outside my apartment building. She pounded on my door, yelling that I owed her the lifestyle she had lost. I stayed behind the locked door and warned her to leave or I'd call the police. She cursed at me and stomped away, threatening to ruin my life. A few neighbors peeked out of their doors, their concern evident. I felt a mixture of anger and unease as I realized this wasn't going to end without action. The next day, I informed my lawyer about the latest incident. She suggested I consider filing for a restraining order. In my state, repeated threats, harassment, or intimidation were grounds for such action, and I had a growing pile of evidence, texts, voicemails, witness statements, and testimonies from my father, neighbors, and even my boss. I wasn't about to sit back and let her continue her campaign of chaos. I compiled everything into a detailed file. Screenshots of her manipulative messages, voicemails where she threatened me, and a list of witnesses who could corroborate her behavior. If she dared push further, I would be ready to respond with legal action. It didn't take long for her to strike again. One evening, as I was heading to my car behind my apartment complex, she ambushed me. Without warning, she launched into a tirade, demanding money to cover her supposed legal fees. If I refused, she threatened to accuse me publicly of terrible things. slander, abuse, exploitation. This time I was ready. As she ranted, I discreetly turned on my phone's audio recorder. She laid out her threats in explicit detail, making it clear she intended to destroy my reputation unless I gave her what she wanted. Once I felt I had enough evidence, I calmly told her we were done. She tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away, warning her never to touch me again. I reminded her that I had documented everything and would not hesitate to protect myself. She scoffed, claiming no one would believe me, but I walked away without another word, leaving her standing there. That night, I reviewed the recording. Her threats were unmistakable. I forwarded the audio file to my lawyer, who confirmed it was exactly the proof we needed to take action. With her help, I filed for a restraining order, including a detailed account of her harassment and blackmail attempts. My father and a neighbor provided written statements about her outbursts, and my boss offered his own testimony about the scene at the restaurant. The authorities didn't hesitate. A few days later, she was officially served with the restraining order. According to a mutual acquaintance, she was livid when the police handed her the paperwork. She tried to play the victim, claiming I was the one ruining her life, but the officer was unmoved. The law was now forcing her to respect boundaries. Not long after, she made one last desperate attempt to tarnish my name. She posted a long, dramatic rant on social media, painting me as a heartless villain who had promised her the world and left her in ruins. She hinted at abuse, though she offered no evidence to support her claims. My lawyer acted swiftly, sending a cease and desist letter warning her of legal consequences if she continued defaming me. Within hours, she deleted the post, likely realizing she couldn't back up her lies in court. Relief washed over me. I hadn't sought revenge. I simply wanted peace. But in protecting myself, I had also exposed her manipulations. Her reputation took a hit as her lies unraveled. Even her wealthy acquaintances began distancing themselves from her drama. She tried messaging me one last time, asking if we could talk. I ignored it. My father reminded me that while forgiveness has its place, so does protecting my peace. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. A few weeks later, the restraining order was finalized. She was barred from contacting me or coming near my home or workplace. Any violation would result in immediate legal action. My lawyer warned me she could still attempt frivolous claims, but I had more than enough evidence to counter any lies. In the end, I wasn't just free from her chaos. I had proven to myself that I could stand my ground. She had tried every tactic: intimidation, manipulation, guilt, but I refused to yield. This wasn't about revenge. It was about drawing a line she couldn't cross. Now I could finally move on with my life, unburdened and at peace.